In this two-part episode of At the Podium, I sit down with LeRoy McClain, an award-winning actor who has distinguished himself on and off Broadway and in such television shows as And Just Like That and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and the feature film Respect. This week, we follow the journey of LeRoy's career and how it almost didn't happen at all. He also gives us personal and touching views of his relationships with the three major leading ladies in his career, Jennifer Hudson, Rachel Brosnahan, and Karen Pittman, and what he learned from working with these three powerhouse artists. LeRoy also goes into how the untimely death of his father made him consider giving up being an actor, but was also the inciting event in his life that freed him to experience some of the biggest successes of his career. Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform where story by story, we explore the resiliency of the human spirit with people who are using their own personal journeys to leave a positive and transformative imprint on our world today. At the Podium holds a space for meaningful conversation, inspiration, and life. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with LeRoy McClain. LeRoy McClain is an award-winning British-American stage and screen actor. He currently stars as Andre Rashad Wallace on HBO Max's hit show And Just Like That, as Shy Baldwin in Amazon Prime's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He earned a 2020 SAG Award for Best Ensemble in a Comedy Series. Mr. McClain also stars as Cecil Franklin in the MGM feature film Respect, alongside Jennifer Hudson and Forest Whitaker. For the stage, he has performed extensively in venues across the globe, appearing on Broadway in The History Boys and Shakespeare's Cymbeline, and in many notable off-Broadway and international productions, including Plenty opposite Rachel Weisz, Othello opposite Philip Seymour Hoffman and Jessica Chastain, and The Good Negro opposite Anthony Mackie, directed by Liesl Tommy, all for the Public Theater. He is a graduate of the Yale School of Drama and the Royal National Theatre of Great Britain. LeRoy, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is a real pleasure, honor to have you on the show today. I'm so happy we're going to be talking.
Absolutely. Anything for you, Patrick.
See, already we're off to a good start. We're already in a good place, man. I'm telling you.
Yes.
So I have three names I want to say to you.
Okay.
Jennifer Hudson, Karen Pittman, Rachel Brosnahan, the three sort of leading ladies in your life. So when you're on set with these powerhouse women, what does that feel like for you? Because they're three very different actresses, but also what do you learn from them?
You know, all three of those women have in common is that they are incredibly, incredibly gracious. Let's start with Rachel. My involvement with Maisel, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, was a whirlwind. I think from original audition to producer session to being on set, all of that happened within a span, maybe a week. And when I say week, I mean like business week. So like 5 days. Like,
okay,
it was insane. Like after the producer session, there was a day and then I had to be on set. And it was like being thrown out of a window of a plane at 30,000 feet. That show it runs like a metronome, much like the cadence of the comedy. The set is such a well-oiled machine. That's, Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino that's there. That's the way they like to work. Now, to a newcomer, namely myself, I felt like a fish out of water. I'd never done comedy like that. At that point, I mean, you'd know this. especially when you're coming from the theater. It's a lot of heavy stuff. Our currency is usually ripping our guts out and you know, railing against injustice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So not only am I nervous about just flexing my comedy muscles, but then to be on set with people like Rachel or Kevin Pollak or Tony Shalhoub, people that just are funny just by breathing, right?
Yeah.
So Rachel was actually the first cast member that I met, and immediately she gave me the hugest hug. She held my hand and said that we're going to be in this together.
Mm.
What I discovered about her, what she told me from right from the jump, is even though she's playing this housewife turned superstar comedian, she is deathly afraid of comedy, can't do stand up. This is all in her head, and has stage fright. And the way that show works, you're always in front. Like if you're performing, what we did this one episode, the first episode of the third season, which is at the USO.
Hmm.
And rather than kind of tiling in fake background people, they actually hired all close to 1,000 background actors, which at that point was like the largest number of background actors ever for a single day of shooting
Yeah.
on a TV show in New York. So she let me be known that like having to perform, being asked to do that episode after episode was terrifying for her. So that put
Really?
me immediately at ease because I'm not, I mean, the character I play, Shy Baldwin's supposed to be a world-renowned singer, right? That ain't me. I don't do musicals. I can carry a tune when forced, but it's not naturally my bag. And
Hmm.
so for her to, I guess, maybe sense something in my eyes, that meant a lot.
Yeah.
The same definitely goes for Jennifer Hudson or J Hud. Again, gracious, gracious actor. And yet again, I find myself in a place where that it's all about singing and it's about Aretha. So the whole family's musical. It's in their blood.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, God is really laughing at me because he's making me do all these things that like I'm just not comfortable doing. But again, like luckily our stations were right next to each other in hair and makeup, like every day in the trailer, joking with her, just erased any sort of like, oh my God, you're J Hud. You've got like the voice of heaven, literally at the just it's ridiculous how she can just go into an aria at the drop of a hat, full voice.
I
And
mean, and like perfect pitch and the
yes,
whole thing, and like,
yeah,
yeah,
like she would just be humming something to herself, and then she'd look around, and the entire crew is just kind of looking at her like, where did that? It's just so effortless for
you
her,
know, it's
right?
funny you say that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I saw her and Cynthia Erivo in The Color Purple on
Color
Broadway,
Purple, uh-huh,
and both of them are just incredible. I mean, you can't
true,
even there's no daylight between them in terms of how just beautifully they sing.
yeah.
When Jennifer would sing, though, the effortlessness of how she produced that sound, and I don't even think she really needed a microphone.
No, no, she doesn't. Like somebody that like literally sat next to her for like 3.5 months. She needs no microphone. Like,
Yeah,
and the number of takes that she had to just sing full out. I mean, I don't know how many songs that she sings in the film, but every take, every time she brought it. No half stepping, no kind of just futzing around and giving it half energy, full out every single time.
mm,
True artist. And like I said before, incredibly, incredibly gracious. Made me feel so welcome. Because I'm part of this family that it's being betrayed by Jennifer Hudson, Audra McDonald, Saquon Sengblow, and Haley Kilgore, who are all of them like Tony nominated, Tony winning, obviously. So to feel welcome in that group was largely done by her. I felt just as musical and just with it as them.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, and then Karen Pittman, my heart, my heart, my heart. Karen and I actually we graduated. She graduated the year before me. She went to the rival school, Patrick, not our beloved Yale. She went to NYU.
NYU.
And there is another rival, as we know. So we've been acquaintances for quite some time, and she was cast before me, and so our chemistry read together over Zoom, which is very interesting to do, was largely, based on how I read with her. If one of us was not up to par, it was not going to be me that was going to be staying. So again, she had obviously spoken to Michael Patrick King about me. And so he was already in my corner. So it made the chemistry read completely effortless. And so then we began first day on set on crafting the relationship between this couple. And she works in the way that I like to work, which is incredibly collaborative. Because I still hold to that, those ideals of the theater, that like we're all in this together, and
Hmm.
she is cut from the same cloth. And so again, graciousness personified. All three of those women, very different, but very singular in the way that they approach their work and the way that they just come at you with open arms.
I want to go back to Mrs. Maisel because I thought the Shy Baldwin performance was so thoughtful.
Yeah.
But you also talk about how that show was really special to you because it was the first or the second show that you did after your father passed away.
Yeah. It was anybody that has lost a parent like unexpectedly, or sibling,
Yeah.
someone very close. It literally feels like the rug's been pulled out from under you. And my father passed in July of 2018, and I was a complete and utter mess, right? And like you then have the duty of doing a funeral. My dad had 15 brothers and sisters.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. So that's a lot of people to navigate, right? And so you're just kind of going on intuition. You're not. I just felt like a shell of myself. I felt like I felt just empty, soulless on the inside. And I remember laying on my childhood bed in my parents' house a couple of days after my dad had passed, and just saying to myself, what am I going to do? There's no way I can go back to New York and be an actor. It seems like the most frivolous, meaningless thing I could think to do after something so monumental had happened. And I'm bursting into tears like randomly. I'm like, I can't. I can't be trusted in public without like embarrassing myself. So a month later, I was down there for about a month. I came back to New York, and Maisel was the second audition I had, and that was day 4 of being back.
Hmm.
And I don't know what was going through my head. I guess what helped is that I am kind of comfortable in that time period. I've done a lot of period stuff. Done a lot of civil rights era stuff. Anywhere from like the Harlem Renaissance to the 50s and 60s was like, I'm very comfortable in that. So the initial audition felt really good. And then in the producer session, what's so great about Amy and Dan is they kind of take almost the British. If you've ever worked with like Brit directors, they love to just chat and really chat, not just like kind of fake to kind of get to the audition, but really chat. So they just asked me, how I was doing. What did I want to talk about? So this is 2018. So of course, I'm sure I'd read something that Trump had done or said something that I thought was like the most ridiculous thing ever. So I was like, you know what? I want to talk about politics, So we talked for like 20 minutes. I was just railing against Trump and the system and how America's broken, yada yada yada. And then
Yeah.
like, okay, do you want to just take a stab at at the scene? And I was like, oh yeah, 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 of course. And I had no inhibitions whatsoever at that point because I was just going with it, and it was a recipe made in heaven, I guess. Because if you could see the waiting room for that producer session had killer vocalists. So much so that, I that may have also helped me too. Is that like I was like, well, they're not going to cast me because you've got bona fide Broadway stars and recording artists that they're seeing for this. So yeah, it was for me. The way I rationalize it for myself is that was my dad.
Mm.
He's always been a champion of me. And being in the theater at that point, that was most of what I'd done. they live in Texas, and so they were not able to see the vast bulk of the work that I did. And he always wanted me to be on TV so that he and so that my, my large extended family could see me and could see what I do. And he loved this era. And I have to believe that he had something to do with that audition coming through and with me getting that job, especially at the point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't think I
Yeah.
want to do this anymore.
That tends to show up in a lot of stories that people, the minute they say I'm done, and whatever that just frees in a person to no
Yeah.
longer have, like you said, how do I look? And is the clothing right? And the
Yeah.
minute you say I'm done and you free yourself from that, that's
Yeah.
when the magic kind of happens, which is
Right.
interesting. There's like a life lesson somewhere in there about letting go, or
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, it's
Yeah. Letting go. And that's something that I know in my life. I mean, I used to worry about everything. So being freer, letting go is something I've to keep reminding myself to do because it doesn't come naturally to me
Mhm.
at all.
So I have a question about Shy.
Hmm.
I think rhythmically, he's very interesting to the rest of the characters in the show because that show's really, really fast. And it's set up, joke, move, 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 move. And the performances are brilliant, by the way, but they're
Yeah.
quick. It's very
Yes.
quick. And Shy isn't.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Why is he in the show? What kind of dimensionality is he bringing? And what are we supposed to learn from his journey in the show? Because it's ultimately it's not a tragedy. I mean, he makes some really difficult decisions,
Yeah.
but why is he in the show?
Why is he in the show? That's a good question. That's what I asked myself a lot because I came onto the show towards the end of season two, but I'd never watched it. I'm not sure why. I think I kind of assumed, probably subconsciously, that it just wasn't for me. I didn't see anybody that looked like me. Not that I'm only drawn to work that's got Black people in it. I don't mean to say that. It was just something, I think, a combination of what, since comedy is not my bag, like when I got cast and I really started to think about the character, initially I was like, okay, they're wanting to broaden the scope, right? Widen the aperture to go, okay, there's more that's going on. Important things, obviously. We're talking about the late 50s, early 60s. A lot of important stuff is going on in the United States at this time. And while we're following Midge's story, it's a very privileged one from Upper East Side. There was nobody that looked like me at all on the show. So it's like, this is a great opportunity to show the textures that fill out the world. Season one is very much about how Midge travels from being housewife to getting like her first break as a comedian. And so now in season two, we're widening it. We're being more inclusive.
Yeah.
And secondly, when I talked to Amy Sherman Palladino about it, her dad was a stand-up comic. He was a traveling comedian for a recording artist. I cannot remember which one, but he was Black. I think the show, for a number of reasons, is very personal to Amy. And so having this element, which is very much an element of her dad's existence, was very important for her,
Hmm.
having the show. And so, when just putting us, it's not enough, right? You talked about rate of, yeah, how fast everybody talks versus how Shy talks. And it's, for me, I don't just want to be like the blackface, right?
Yeah.
In the sea of whiteness, right? It's
Hmm.
got to, you can't just have us. You got to write for us. And so it's very important to kind of make him feel real in that
Hmm.
sense, for me, and lived in. And so for me, I think what Shy is meant to represent, he represents a couple of things. The first, I think, for Midge, the main character, he's an important lesson to her, and that is friendship and relationships within the entertainment industry, and how there are a lot of people that believe that you can't really have true friendship, especially when there's a power dynamic, right? Shai's
Right.
the headliner. She's starting out. She's like the headlining comedian, but there's no doubt as to, who's calling the shots. And so we see her overstep and transgress in a very big way. and this is just on the we're not even talking about the friendship level, but on a
Right.
professional level, she makes a very big, dangerous, and almost, I would say, almost a deadly mistake.
Yeah.
And she pays a price for it. And I think that's very important for her in that journey, in her journey.
Hmm.
Second of all, I think Shy is there to remind us of the tremendous cost that a lot of performers, especially Black performers, had to incur. Especially somebody with Shy, he's harboring the secret of being gay. There's no way that he could be his authentic true self. And so I think that's the other reason why he's in the show, is to show, Midge wants this thing. She wants this fame. And Shy represents, be careful what you wish for. This is the cost.
Yeah.
Are you willing to be alone? Are you willing to live a life like this, where you'll have the fame, but you don't have the comfort? You don't have like the emotional, spiritual comfort. We do pay a cost, as you mentioned the word tragedy. I do kind of view his arc as a tragic one,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and one to as a lesson to be learned. That might be a little too harsh, but yeah, just all that glitters isn't gold, for sure.
Yeah. I think you're right, Leroy, because he makes some difficult choices. And I think, I guess it's not he lives, he doesn't die in the show. So maybe
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's not Shakespeare where
Yeah.
the die is
No, but
cast, the
like,
cast must die, act five.
right.
But
But that
yeah.
the not to ruin anything, but I mean, if you haven't seen Mrs. Maisel by now, I'm sorry, but like, the last time that you see him, that's kind of like the thesis.
Yeah.
Is this is the cost
Yeah.
of fame?
So you mentioned Karen Pittman. And
Yes.
so I want to know what it has been like for you to enter in this world of Sex and the City and just like that, because those four women, now three women, are these sort of iconic figures that represent New York at a very specific time in that city's history. So what has that been like for you to enter into that
You know, um,
world?
it's a world that I never saw myself being a part of.
Mm,
I watched a few episodes of the original, but like, I don't know, maybe I just wasn't the right age for it. I got caught up in the hoopla enough to tune in to a few episodes, but I had images in my head of what the show is and what the people looked like on the show.
yeah.
And I remember when I got that audition, I had moved from New York to LA a couple months prior, and I was already doing flying back and forth for Maisel. But I remember when I got the audition came through for that, I was gonna say no, because I was
Interesting.
like, yeah, I was like, in my head, I was like, I know the type of person that they want on this show, and it's not me. So I'm not. The last thing I need is another audition as acting exercise. I don't really, I don't really need that. So, but my good friend and classmate, um, who read with me, was just like, no, no, we're gonna do this. But I'm so glad that I did, because obviously I got it, and is another lesson to not talk myself out of a job. Let casting or let the producers, let the network do that for you. They're more than willing to do that for you. We don't need to do it for ourselves. And so, what I loved about joining that show, much like Maisel, and I think it's because, Sarah Jessica and Kristen and Cynthia have known each other for years. The atmosphere was very jovial. It was very family like. And also, what really struck me was the crew was the
Mm,
most diverse crew I had ever had on a set. I'd never seen that many Black people, women working on a show. And for me personally, that also made me feel, okay, all right, maybe I do belong here. So, what was great for me on that show is that, as we all know, the show is about four women in its initial incarnation and a world, as I mentioned earlier, that did not tend to include us. I think Blair Underwood right? He was on the show back in the day. And so what that gave Karen and I, we kind of took it very seriously. We're like, okay, they've never seen a couple like us because we're also not rich. We're not down and out, but we're just like, kind of boho, kind of, artsy, eclectic Black folks that do exist, that we run Brooklyn. For us, it was very important about crafting a relationship that was very believable, but also one that was filled with love.
Mm.
And of course, as a married couple, they have some issues, one very, very, very big issue.
Yep.
But the love, I mean, their phrase, that we'd always say to each other is one of Andre Rashad's first lines, and it's nothing but love. And that is for them. They begin, doesn't necessarily, I don't want to ruin it, doesn't necessarily like end that way, but with love, especially in that first season. And that was beautiful. There's another Black couple, played by Nicole Ari Parker and Christopher Jackson, but they're, of a
Oh
much
yeah.
higher economic ilk than we are. So this was very new on multiple levels for the show. And so you do feel a certain sense of responsibility,
Hmm.
but also freedom. For us, there weren't any rules set. And we were able to really work together to fashion like a beautiful relationship between these two people. And so to be in that world, it meant a lot. I learned a lot. Everything doesn't run smoothly. There are going to be growing pains. And so when you do have a property that is embracing new elements, us for the first time, there are going to be some bumps in the road. There are going to be some learning curves. And so those are bound to happen. But I think there's at least a willingness to really embrace inclusivity. It felt great to be in that space because I know there were some raised eyebrows, especially when they did a steady rollout of like, oh, this actor is going to be on it, this actor is going to be on it, and the chatter online with each new Black and brown face that was rolled out, there was a lot of skepticism, and people have different opinions. Critics have different opinions about, how successfully or not the show has pulled it off. But it felt good to at least be um, at the start of something.
Yeah, and I don't think we can, and this is my own view, and it's probably not a pervasive view, but I think we can't castigate shows for trying to do the right thing, even if they
Mhm.
don't do it right
Yeah,
100% of the
yeah,
time,
yeah.
because that's how progress happens. And if it doesn't happen, if there aren't the mistakes, if people aren't trying, then we just end up nowhere. And I think we
Mhm.
have gotten so on this treadmill, this hamster wheel of like, if it's not exactly the way I want it to be, it's wrong and it should be demonized and, you know, thrown out with last night's garbage. And then just, I don't, especially in the creative process, there is no creative process that is without flaws and mistakes, but that's the creative process.
Yeah,
So I guess I feel a little bit more, I don't know. I'm just not really ready to burn down buildings anymore over stuff like that. So I mean, it is what it is, and people are trying to do the
yeah,
best they know how.
yeah.
That's
And
it.
as long as that work continues and deepens and broadens, right? That's the important thing. But you can, I agree with you in that because what happens is then you start having people that are not including us out of fear. I have a lot of white friends that are writers, and whenever I'm asked, like, well, what do you think about, or should I write this? I'm always like, yeah, write it and write from a
Right.
place of truth. And if there's something that you don't know, research, find it out. Grab a Black person, ask them, does this sound correct, or whatever. But like not writing or not even attempting to diversify or be inclusive just because you don't have necessarily a firsthand knowledge of it, that can't fly anymore. And we're never going to have true progress unless, as you said, like you just acknowledge that at least the effort, full faith effort, is being made. And then if there are mistakes, learn from them. So, I just don't, I want to see this continue. And, obviously the industry's going through a number of growing pains, but there's just certain things you can't go backwards, right? And when it comes to things of like inclusivity, it's like you can eliminate the DEI program, but that doesn't do any that doesn't eliminate where society is, where we are going out. No, we're not going to stand for inaccurate representations anymore. It's like demography, right? It's moving in one direction. Like
Right.
we are as a society, we are browning. We
Right.
are all sorts of wonderful mixtures of ethnicities and backgrounds. That's not going backwards.
No.
One way or another, it's happening.
It's interesting about that show too, because I feel like people are so attached to what that show was 30 years ago
Yeah.
and who those people were.
Yeah.
And as I knew we were talking, I was sort of looking through Sex and the City stuff and just like that. And I was like, why can't these women evolve and change? Like if they were those same people who we met in 1990, whatever, 96 in Manhattan, and they were
Yeah.
behaving the same, looking the same, we'd be like, what's wrong with you? Like that
Right.
world is gone. And I think there's something really interesting, but we can't allow these because they get stuck in these time capsules in our mind. And I feel like part
Yeah.
of the show, it's a different show. People are they're 50s, probably touching 60 years old. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a different world.
Yeah.
When you sent me over your bio and I was looking through it, and one thing that I noticed that was very different, because I've interviewed a lot of actors on the show, your bio leaned so heavily into the theater. And oftentimes, people reach a certain point and they stop talking about their theater work. And most people start in the theater, so it's not
Yeah.
like this thing, it's weird. But
Yeah.
why is theater so important to you?
Ah. First of all, when I came out of school, drama school, I felt safe in that world. I felt like I knew what I was doing.
Hmm.
Not so much with TV and film. And this is a lesson to be learned for folks. We had somebody come in. He's a guy that had directed a lot of TV in like the 60s and the 70s. And we had one class and he had us do this part of it. We had to do basically what like a slate is. You're right. Today, it's just us getting comfortable being in front of a camera, saying our name, saying a little bit about ourselves. And he was going to play casting director and go, okay, this is how I see you. This is what I could put you in. And I remember when I did mine and the whole class is watching it back, basically looked at me and was like, I don't know, maybe something physical. And I wasn't aware of how like that one comment affected how I saw myself, one, and two, the trajectory of my career. So it began as survival, really. Like, okay, theater's got to be my world because I'm never going to be doing TV and film because, I'm not cut out to do it. What theater grew to be for me was, I mean, I have been so lucky and blessed to work and be championed by certain directors that have allowed me to cross off dream roles.
Hamlet.
Yeah, I mean, there's so few of us that actually get to play Hamlet, and especially people that look like you and I.
Man, we are Benvolio'd and
Oh my
Horatio'd
goodness,
to death.
to death, to death. She is a dear friend of mine, dear friend, Liesl Tommy, this South African director. And there's just some people in this world you just click with
Yep.
mentally and artistically. And she and I just, boom. So she afforded me the opportunity to play Hamlet, to play Walter Lee Younger in Raising in the Sun, to play Boy Willie in August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, to, this fantastic play called The Good Negro, which is about the civil rights movement, about Martin Luther King and Abernathy and this guy, Rutherford, who is a European born and raised Quaker, black man Quaker that was part of the movement you don't hear much about.
No.
But a brilliant role. And so I just got to be as big. I felt like a giant, man. I felt like I was given so many opportunities and it allowed me to live larger than life. I mean, you play these roles, these iconic roles that playwrights don't tend to write these very kind of earnest, huge speech giving characters anymore in this age of irony, right? So I felt like I could take on anything. And so, but the downside is I was like 35 years old and I was like, every morning I wake up, some part of me hurts. I have been wielding a broadsword. I have been doing stage combat. I have been doing all of this for so long. Theater, I love you. And I want to be able to walk by the time I reach 60. That would be nice.
Yeah.
So I decided just to, face those demons about not feeling good enough for TV and film. And luckily, so far so good.
I love the level of success you've had in the theater and what you're building in television and film, but that almost didn't happen for you. So you're planning to be Mr. Secretary for the State Department,
Yes.
and you graduated top of your class for Poli-Sci at Loyola Marymount.
Yeah.
So why are we
Mm.
sitting here talking about Jennifer Hudson and Karen Pittman and Hamlet and Cymbeline? And I mean, how did we get here?
Dude, bruh, I don't like I stumbled into it because my second roommate in college was a theater major. And I remember making fun of him, like, why are you wasting your parents' money? Study, can't you just go and act? Like I
Go
didn't know
do
anything
it.
about it. So I had my ducks. Like I said, I'm naturally a control freak. So in college, I was a poli-sci major, so I had it all mapped out. I was going to go to Harvard Law. I was going to go to the JFK School of Government, and I was going to get a joint degree, and I was going to become an ambassador, preferably to like a Spanish-speaking nation, because Spanish was my foreign language in high school and in college. And then my junior year, my good friend Deshaun Terry, who's an amazing actor, he was on the morning show with
Mm.
Karen Pittman, and that was a great connection too, by the way. But I digress. He was cast in a production of Hamlet. He really wanted Horatio. He really wanted his best friend and confidant to be another black man, and Deshaun was the only black guy in the theater department at Loyola Marymount. And so because my roommate was a theater major and they were much more interesting and eclectic to hang out with than the poli-sci majors, they knew me and they knew my name, they knew my face, and they obviously knew that I was black.
Yeah.
And as I said, I love language, I love words. And so I knew it. I knew Shakespeare. I knew how it should sound. And so I just kind of did that when I read for the director, and they cast me. And here I am. I did have, everyone talks about that fork in the road moment. And I can say with absolute clarity, I had that. And there was a decision I had to make before the summer between my junior and senior year. I had, like I said, I was a big nerd, did all my classwork, got good grades. And so I was somehow my name was selected for this prestigious fellowship called the Hansard Fellowship, which is they select like 5 or 6 promising college students from across the country. You go to London, take classes at the London School of Economics for a year, and then while you're doing that, you also are an intern for a member of the House of Parliament.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that opportunity was given to me, but then a couple people from the UK that came over. One was representing Oxford. There's an acting program, summer acting program at Oxford, and somebody else was representing the summer program at the Royal National Theatre. Now it's just referred to as the National in London. And similar, I think they take like actually only 3 theater. You're supposed to be a theater major, but they kind of snuck me in there. 3 theater majors from America, and then everybody else are like professional level actors, a mix of UK and US people. So for whatever I auditioned, and I was selected as one of the 3 students, which was kind of, I think, through a lot of the faculty at Loyola. Kind
Excellent.
of, I'm not even part of your program. So I had that choice. So these 2 things, both taking place in London, unfortunately, the exact same time. And I picked the National. As I said, I'd done Hamlet a little earlier in that year, and I just it was like that new love. It was that fresh young love, and politics was the old love. It was, and here's this acting, who was the side piece, is now getting all my attention.
Your
And I
trophy
was
wife.
like, I know, and I was like, I think I'm gonna do that. I think I want to do that. I literally had to say that in front of the chair of the Poli-Sci department. Bless his heart. I don't know what he said about me after I left the room. I don't know what he said to the other faculty members, but he made me feel like I was making a sound decision for me.
Mm.
And I made it. And there's no way I could think of doing anything else after the program that I did at the National. I mean, I was taught by Ian McClain, Patsy Rodenberg, Judy Dench. I mean, come on, like you can't. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? That the whole thing about like
Yeah.
the life in the theater is such a grand proposition, right? And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what life would have looked like had I kept going with that.
Next week on part 2 of At the Podium with LeRoy McClain.
What's interesting, maybe things have changed now, but I felt that like when I was their age, being mixed really wasn't, you kind of had to choose. Like society views me, I'm a black man. I just was talking to my sister about something. I was in college, and I referred to myself. I was like, because being a black man, da 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 da. My mother was like, but you're also part of. I'm,
Mm.
I'm in you as well.